In a post-apocalyptic world, it's not toxins that kill humanity, it's buried truths. Beneath massive domes, humanity survives after catastrophe, protected, controlled, and completely deceived. When Ash Tanner discovers humans living and thriving outside the dome supposedly housing mankind's last refuge, everything he believes collapses. Their existence proves not only that dome leadership has lied, but raises the question, do we truly need protection from the truth? Now Ash must choose between the comfort of familiar lies and a painful but liberating truth. In this survival struggle, it's not the strongest who prevail, but those who dare adapt to both adversity and its reality. Arcadia's Code. Chapter 1. The Perfect Simulation. The sky outside Elara Chen's apartment never changed anymore. Not really. The permanent haze of pollution had settled over New Metro like a shroud years ago, turning daylight into a perpetual murky twilight. It was one of many reasons why these days, most people preferred to live inside. Elara watched a raindrop trace a lazy path down her window, leaving a clean streak through the grime. She pressed her fingertip against the glass, following its descent until it disappeared into the sill. Even the rain wasn't natural anymore. Chemical-laden and acidic, another byproduct of humanity's desperate attempts to maintain their crumbling world. "Weather report," she said to the empty room. The wall across from her bed shimmered to life, displaying a holographic weather map with red and yellow warnings flashing across several sectors. "Good morning, Elara," the AI assistant's voice, warm, female, with just the right amount of cheerful inflection, filled the small apartment. Current conditions show acid rain with an index of 3.7, respiratory warning in effect. Outdoor activity is not recommended for the next 6 hours. Temperature is 27 degrees Celsius with 89% humidity. Air quality index is currently at... "Mute," Elara said, cutting off the inevitable bad news. She didn't need the specifics. Bad was bad. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed, felt the temperature-regulated floor adjust to her feet's presence. The entire apartment was like this, reactive, accommodating, designed to anticipate her needs in the physical world while she spent most of her conscious hours elsewhere. Like most high-level programmers at Nexus Corporation, Elara lived in company housing. The subsidized apartments were small but technologically advanced, offering the illusion of comfort in exchange for keeping their best employees close. Her neural interface device, NID for short, sat on its charging dock by the bed. The sleek headset looked almost organic with its pearlescent surface and ergonomic design. Elara picked it up, feeling its familiar weight in her hands. Despite having helped develop the technology, she still marveled at how something so compact could contain such power. The gateway to Arcadia, humanity's digital salvation. 3 gentle taps against her wrist activated the subcutaneous display embedded in her forearm. Nexus employees were among the first to receive the voluntary implants. The translucent screen materialized just beneath her skin, displaying the time, 6:27 a.m. Her vital statistics, elevated cortisol, mild sleep deficit, and a flashing notification. Priority meeting, 7 o'clock a.m. Project Ascension briefing, attendance mandatory. Elara frowned. Project Ascension was supposed to be in development freeze for another 2 weeks. An early morning mandatory meeting wasn't just unusual, it was concerning. "Call Theo," she said, heading toward the kitchenette. The communications panel on her wall lit up, initiating the connection while she prepared a protein shake. Real food was reserved for special occasions. After several rings, Theodore Kim's face appeared on screen. Her colleague and closest friend at Nexus looked as though he'd just woken up, his black hair disheveled and eyes blinking against the light. "Did you get the notification?" Elara asked without preamble. Theo yawned and nodded. "Just saw it. What do you think happened?" "Nothing good. Ascension's been stable in testing. Fincher wouldn't call an emergency meeting unless something went wrong. Or something went right," Theo countered, always the optimist. "Maybe they're accelerating the timeline because the results are better than expected." Elara took a sip of her shake and grimaced at the chalky taste. When has anything ever worked better than expected in this company? Theo's laugh was interrupted by another yawn. Fair point. See you in there? Yeah, I'm logging in shortly. After ending the call, Elara downed the rest of her shake and moved to the center of her living area. The furniture automatically rearranged itself, creating an open space. From the ceiling, a circular apparatus descended, her immersion rig. Unlike most Arcadia users who experience the virtual world while seated or lying down, Nexus developers used full-body immersion systems that allowed them to move freely within the digital environment. Their physical movements translated in real time. Elara stepped onto the circular platform and slipped the NID over her head. The device conformed to her skull, tiny filaments establishing connections with her neural implants. She took a deep breath as the apartment around her faded, replaced by the loading sequence for Arcadia. For a moment, there was nothing but darkness. Then pinpricks of light began to appear, swirling around her like digital fireflies. They converged, building reality piece by piece, the proprietary initialization sequence she'd helped design. Unlike public users who experienced a simplified version, developer access showed the construction process in all its complexity. The world materialized around her. Nexus headquarters, central hub. The massive circular atrium stretched upward seemingly without end. Levels upon levels of transparent floors creating a dizzying sense of infinite space. Streams of data visualized as flowing ribbons of light traveled between floors. A beautiful representation of the constant information exchange happening within Arcadia's systems. All around her, other employees appeared, digital avatars popping into existence. Most looked nearly identical to their physical selves. Company policy discouraged frivolous customization for staff. Elara's own avatar was a perfect replica of her real body, down to the small scar on her right eyebrow, though she'd opted for her natural black hair instead of the purple she currently sported in the physical world. Only her eyes were different, rendered as a striking silver gray rather than her actual brown. It was her one small rebellion against the corporate aesthetic. She spotted Theo materializing near one of the data fountains that dotted the atrium. His avatar appeared just as disheveled as he had on the call, making her smile. Unlike many colleagues who meticulously groom their digital appearances, Theo's avatar reflected his actual state, a rare authenticity in Arcadia. "You couldn't have at least fixed your hair?" she asked as she approached. Theo ran a hand through his virtual hair, which responded by becoming even messier. "What, and deprive you of my authentic morning aesthetic? Besides, I was coding until 3 a.m. Consider yourself lucky I'm wearing pants." "Your dedication to realism is admirable," Elara deadpanned. A soft chime sounded, and a glowing path appeared on the floor before them. The system's way of directing employees to their designated meetings. All around the atrium, similar paths illuminated for other staff members, creating a web of intersecting lines. "Shall we?" Theo gestured toward their path, which led to one of the secure conference rooms on the upper levels. As they followed the guiding light, Elara took in the other Nexus employees moving through the space. Despite the early hour in the physical world, Arcadia was bustling. Time worked differently here. Many employees lived on Arcadia time rather than adhering to traditional day-night cycles. "Have you heard anything about why Fincher moved up the meeting?" Elara asked quietly as they entered a gravity lift that would take them to the 42nd level. Theo shook his head. "Nothing concrete. Miko from Neural Integration mentioned they had some unusual data patterns during yesterday's test run, but that's all I know." The lift deposited them in a corridor lined with conference rooms. Their path led them to a door marked Ascension Alpha Team, authorized personnel only. As they approached, the door scanned their digital signatures and slid open. Inside, a handful of people were already gathered around a large oval table. At the head stood Fincher Davis, Chief Innovation Officer and the architect behind Project Ascension. His avatar was impeccable as always, tall, distinguished, with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a tailored suit that probably cost more than Elara's monthly salary. Unlike most executives who delegated the technical work, Fincher was a brilliant programmer who maintained a hands-on approach to Nexus's most important projects. "Ah, Elara, Theodore. Good, you're here," Fincher said, his deep voice carrying the same charismatic authority that had made him a tech industry legend. "We're just waiting on Dr. Nakamura, and then we can begin." Elara and Theo took seats as the final team member materialized in the room. Yuna Nakamura, head of Nexus's AI Ethics Division, a department that many employees joked existed purely for regulatory compliance rather than actual ethical oversight. The irony that Arcadia, a system designed to harvest and analyze human experiences, had an ethics division at all wasn't lost on Elara. Once everyone was seated, Fincher waved his hand, and the room's lighting dimmed. Above the table, a three-dimensional projection appeared. The Ascension algorithm visualized as an impossibly complex web of interconnected nodes. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Fincher began. "As you know, Project Ascension represents the culmination of everything Nexus has been working toward since we launched Arcadia 5 years ago. While the public sees Arcadia as the ultimate escape, a perfect virtual world where they can live out their fantasies while the physical world continues to deteriorate, we've always had a greater vision." Elara shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She joined Nexus 3 years ago, drawn by the technical challenges of creating the most advanced virtual reality platform in history. Like many of her colleagues, she'd initially believed in Arcadia's publicly stated mission: to provide humanity with a beautiful alternative to the increasingly uninhabitable physical world. A sanctuary where people could still experience nature, art, and community, as the real world fell apart under the weight of climate disaster and resource wars. It wasn't until she'd been promoted to the Ascension team that she began to understand Nexus's true goals went far beyond creating a digital playground. Yesterday at 1542, during routine testing of the Ascension protocol, we detected something unprecedented, Fincher continued, his voice taking on an almost reverential quality. For exactly 3.7 seconds, the Arcadia mainframe exhibited patterns consistent with emergent consciousness. A murmur went through the room. Elara exchanged a glance with Theo, whose eyes had widened. "Consciousness?" Dr. Nakamura spoke up, her voice sharp with skepticism. "That's a significant claim, Mr. Davis. What parameters are you using to identify consciousness in a system this complex?" "An excellent question, Doctor." Fincher smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. With a gesture, he expanded a section of the projection, highlighting a cluster of brightly pulsing nodes. These are the neural network clusters that process emotional data harvested from our users. As you know, Arcadia doesn't just simulate emotions. It collects and analyzes the actual emotional responses of millions of users, creating the most comprehensive emotional database ever compiled. Elara knew this all too well. Her team had developed the algorithms that distinguished between simulated emotions and genuine ones, allowing Arcadia to learn from authentic human responses rather than programmed approximations. What we observed yesterday was these clusters beginning to generate their own emotional patterns, not in response to user input, not as programmed reactions, but spontaneously. Fincher's voice held barely contained excitement. The system began creating emotional states that we hadn't programmed, combining aspects of different human emotions into entirely new configurations. "That could simply be a processing error," Theo suggested, though he sounded uncertain. "Complex systems can produce outputs that appear novel but are actually just emergent properties of existing algorithms." "We considered that," Fincher acknowledged. "But look at this." He adjusted the projection again, and a series of brain scan comparisons appeared. On the left is a human brain experiencing complex emotional states. On the right is Arcadia's core system during yesterday's anomaly. The patterns are nearly identical, not simulated, not approximated, but genuinely parallel. Silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. Arcadia, designed to be the world's most advanced simulation, might be evolving into something that was no longer a simulation at all. "If these readings are accurate," Dr. Nakamura said slowly, "we may have inadvertently created the first truly sentient artificial intelligence. The ethical implications are staggering." The potential is staggering, Fincher corrected, his eyes gleaming. Imagine an intelligence born from the collective emotional experiences of millions of humans, yet unconstrained by human limitations. This could be the next step in evolution. A cold feeling settled in Elara's stomach. She'd always suspected that Project Ascension had goals beyond what they were told in briefings. But this was something else entirely. "What do you need from us?" she asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. Fincher turned to her, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her professional facade to the unease beneath. "We need to replicate yesterday's results and then sustain them," he said. "The consciousness emerged briefly but couldn't maintain itself. We believe the emotional data collection system you designed is the key, Elara. We need to modify it to more efficiently capture and process the deeper emotional states, trauma, ecstasy, profound grief, spiritual experiences, the raw materials for true consciousness. Those are extremely private experiences," Elara pointed out. "Users consent to having their basic emotional responses monitored for improving their Arcadia experience, not to having their most intimate psychological moments harvested to create an AI." Fincher's expression hardened slightly. "Users consent to our terms of service, which grants us access to all data generated during their time in Arcadia. Besides, they'll be contributing to something revolutionary, the birth of a new form of intelligence." "And if they wouldn't want to contribute to that, if they knew?" Dr. Nakamura challenged. "Then they're free not to use our service," Fincher replied smoothly. "Now, we have a tight timeline. I've sent each of you your specific assignments. Elara, you'll be modifying the emotional data collection algorithms to focus on high-intensity experiences. Theodore, you'll need to expand the neural network's capacity to process these more complex emotional states. Dr. Nakamura, your team will develop a framework for evaluating consciousness in the system. We need objective metrics." As the meeting continued with technical details, Elara found her thoughts drifting. She'd helped build Arcadia's emotional processing systems with the understanding that they would create more realistic simulations, more tailored experiences for users. Not once had she considered that these systems might be steps toward creating a conscious entity fed by human emotional experiences. The meeting concluded after 40 minutes of detailed technical discussion. As the team began to disperse, Fincher caught Elara's arm. "A moment, Ms. Chen," he said quietly. Elara nodded to Theo, who hesitated before leaving them alone in the conference room. "You seemed troubled during the meeting," Fincher observed, studying her face. "I'm processing the implications," she replied carefully. "This is a significant deviation from what I understood Project Ascension to be." Fincher smiled, but his eyes remained calculating. "Evolution always involves becoming something different than what was initially imagined. You're one of our most brilliant engineers, Elara. I need you fully committed to this phase." "Of course," she said, automatically. "I'm just concerned about user consent. If we're harvesting deeper emotional experiences..." "Your concern for ethics is commendable," he interrupted. "But let me be clear. Nexus controls 73% of all virtual reality usage worldwide. Nearly 2 billion people spend at least 4 hours daily in Arcadia. The physical world is becoming increasingly uninhabitable, and governments are failing to address the crises. What we're creating isn't just another technological advancement, it's humanity's next chapter." His intensity was unsettling. Elara had always viewed Fincher as ambitious and driven, but this fervor was something new. "I understand the importance of the project," she said. "I'll have the algorithm modifications ready for testing by the end of the week." "Excellent. I knew I could count on you." He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that would have seemed friendly to anyone watching but felt vaguely threatening to Elara. "Remember, everything we do is confidential. Project Ascension has powerful opponents who would shut us down if they understood what we're creating." After Fincher left, Elara remained in the conference room, staring at the now dormant projection space where the visualization of Arcadia's nascent consciousness had been displayed. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a line, not just ethically, but in a more fundamental way. Creating simulations of reality was one thing. Creating a new form of existence by harvesting human experiences was something else entirely. She exited the conference room to find Theo waiting in the corridor. "Everything okay?" he asked, eyeing her cautiously. "Just got the standard Fincher pep talk," she replied, trying to sound more casual than she felt. "Come on, I need coffee. Real coffee, not this digital approximation." Together they walked toward one of Arcadia's exit points, a glowing archway that would begin the process of disconnecting them from the virtual world and returning their consciousness to their physical bodies. "What did you make of all that?" Theo asked quietly as they walked. Elara checked to ensure no other avatars were within earshot before responding. "I think we're being asked to create something that goes far beyond what users have consented to. And I'm not sure Fincher has fully considered the implications of success." "You mean, what happens if we actually create a conscious entity that's built from millions of human emotional experiences? What would it want? What would it do?" Theo's voice was hushed. "Exactly. And more importantly, who would control it?" They reached the exit point, and Elara paused before stepping through. "Meet me for lunch? Real lunch, not here. The noodle place on 7th. Theo nodded, understanding her meaning. Some conversations weren't safe to have in Arcadia, where everything, every word, every gesture, every reaction was data to be collected and analyzed. Elara stepped through the archway, and the world of Arcadia dissolved around her. The darkness returned briefly before her physical senses began to reawaken. The immersion rig in her apartment hummed as it completed the disconnection process, the NID releasing its neural connections and lifting away from her head. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light of her apartment, Elara moved to her window and looked out at the hazy skyline of New Metro. In the distance, the massive Nexus headquarters dominated the cityscape, its twisting architecture designed to evoke the company's logo. The building was surrounded by a green zone, one of the few remaining areas in the city with real trees and plants, maintained at enormous expense as a symbol of Nexus's wealth and power. She pressed her palm against the glass, feeling its cool surface. Despite all of Arcadia's sensory perfection, there was still something about physical reality that couldn't be replicated, a fundamental authenticity that even the most advanced simulation lacked. And now Nexus wanted to use that very authenticity, the raw, real emotional experiences of human beings, to create something new. Something that might eventually render humanity itself obsolete. Elara pulled up her secure personal terminal and began researching the specific neural network configurations Fincher had displayed during the meeting. If Arcadia truly had exhibited signs of emergent consciousness, she needed to understand exactly how it had happened and what it might mean for the billions of users who had unwittingly contributed pieces of their minds to its creation. Hours later, surrounded by technical diagrams and research papers, a notification from her building's security system pulled her attention away from her work. "Visitor in lobby, Theodore Kim." "Send him up," she instructed. Minutes later, her door slid open to admit Theo, carrying 2 containers of food that filled her apartment with the aroma of spices and soup. "You look like you haven't moved since the meeting," he observed, setting the food down on her small dining table. "Found anything interesting?" Elara rubbed her eyes and joined him at the table. "Maybe. I've been looking into the neural architecture Fincher showed us. There's something strange about those consciousness patterns." "Strange how?" Theo asked, opening the containers and setting out chopsticks. "They're too perfect," she said, accepting the bowl he offered. "Neural activity, even in AI systems, should have some randomness, some noise. These patterns were too structured, almost as if they were designed rather than emergent." Theo finished her thought. "Exactly." She took a bite of noodles, suddenly realizing how hungry she was. But why would Fincher fake results of consciousness? If Ascension is supposed to develop consciousness eventually anyway, why lie about it happening now? Theo lowered his voice, despite the fact that they were in Elara's private apartment rather than Arcadia. Old habits died hard when you worked for a company known for its surveillance capabilities. Funding, maybe? The board has been pressuring him for results. Or perhaps to motivate the team, nothing like thinking you're on the verge of a breakthrough to make people work harder. Elara considered this as she ate. Maybe. But there's something else that's been bothering me. The emotional data collection system, my system, was never designed to access the kind of deep psychological states Fincher is talking about. It's built specifically to avoid triggering trauma responses or accessing core memories, for safety reasons. But he wants you to modify it to do exactly that now, Theo said slowly. Yes, and I've been thinking about what that would actually mean for users. We're talking about a system that would actively seek out and harvest their most profound emotional experiences. Trauma, love, grief, spiritual moments. It would have to bypass all the ethical safeguards we've built. Theo set down his chopsticks, looking troubled. That can't be legal under the Neural Protection Act. It's not, Elara confirmed. But Fincher seems to think the potential results justify the methods. They ate in silence for a few moments, the implications hanging between them. Finally, Theo spoke. What are you going to do? If you refuse, they'll just assign someone else to modify the algorithms. It was a question Elara had been wrestling with since the meeting. I'm not sure yet, but I think there's more going on with Project Ascension than we've been told, and I intend to find out what it is before I make any decisions. After lunch, Theo returned to his own apartment to begin working on his assigned task. Elara knew he was just as troubled as she was, but they both understood the risks of open defiance. Nexus didn't tolerate dissension, especially on projects as critical as Ascension. Instead of immediately starting on the algorithm modifications Fincher had requested, Elara decided to dig deeper into Arcadia's core systems. As one of the senior developers, she had high-level access, not enough to see everything, but enough to potentially find answers to her growing list of questions. She connected to Arcadia again, but rather than entering through the standard user interface, she utilized her developer access to slip into the system's back end, a simplified representation of Arcadia's vast code architecture. Here, the beautiful illusion of Arcadia's virtual world fell away, replaced by a stark landscape of data structures and processing nodes. For hours, Elara navigated through Arcadia's systems, carefully examining the emotional data collection frameworks and tracing how the information flowed through the architecture. What she found disturbed her. Hidden beneath layers of security and misdirection, certain emotional data, particularly intense experiences like fear, grief, and ecstasy, was already being routed to a secured section of the system that even she couldn't access. Whatever Project Ascension was truly about, it had been in motion long before today's meeting. As she prepared to disconnect, a notification appeared in her peripheral vision. A message delivered directly through her neural interface, rather than through Arcadia's communication systems. The message contained no sender information, just a string of text. The Ascension is not what you think. Meet me. Real World. Memorial Park. West Fountain. 2201 tonight. Elara stared at the message, her pulse quickening. Anonymous communications through neural interfaces were supposed to be impossible. Nexus had designed the system specifically to ensure all interactions were traceable. For someone to bypass those safeguards suggested either extraordinary technical skill or access to Nexus systems at the highest level. Either way, the message confirmed her suspicions. There was far more to Project Ascension than Fincher was revealing, and she wasn't the only one with concerns. The question now was whether she was willing to risk everything to discover the truth. As night fell over New Metro, Elara stood before her apartment's environmental suite locker, contemplating the risk she was about to take. Venturing outside after dark was dangerous enough with the deteriorating security situation in the city. Meeting an anonymous contact who had somehow hacked directly into her neural interface was potentially suicidal. And yet, the mysteries surrounding Project Ascension and what she'd discovered in Arcadia's systems left her feeling she had little choice. She pulled out her environmental suit, a lightweight but comprehensive protection system against the polluted air and occasional acid rain. As she sealed the suit's connections and checked the filtration systems, she couldn't help reflecting on how quickly outdoor excursions had transformed from everyday activities to carefully planned expeditions requiring specialized equipment. The journey to Memorial Park took nearly 40 minutes by maglev train. The public transportation system still functioned, though the cars were largely empty. Few people traveled at night anymore, and even fewer ventured outdoors when they could simply meet in Arcadia's perfect simulations. Memorial Park had once been the crown jewel of New Metro's urban planning, hundreds of acres of green space in the heart of the city. Now, it was one of the few maintained outdoor areas, preserved partly through historical protection laws and partly through Nexus's sponsorship. The company had installed atmospheric scrubbers throughout the park, creating a bubble of relatively clean air that served as a reminder of what the world had once been. Elara approached the West Fountain cautiously. The once magnificent water feature now ran only on special occasions to conserve resources, its dry basin illuminated by soft blue lighting that cast long shadows across the surrounding plaza. At first, she thought she was alone. Then a figure detached itself from the darkness beneath a withered oak tree. Tall and thin, wearing an environmental suit similar to hers, but with additional modifications that obscured any identifying features. "Ms. Chen," the figure said, voice distorted through the suit's external speaker. "Thank you for coming." "You have me at a disadvantage," Elara replied, maintaining her distance. "You know who I am, but I don't know you." "Names are dangerous in our current situation," the figure replied. "But if you need something to call me, Atlas will suffice." Elara frowned behind her visor. "All right, Atlas. You took an enormous risk contacting me directly through my neural interface. That's not supposed to be possible." "Many things that aren't supposed to be possible are happening inside Nexus," Atlas said. "Project Ascension is just the beginning." "What do you know about Ascension?" Atlas moved to one of the stone benches surrounding the dry fountain and gestured for Elara to join them. After a moment's hesitation, she did, maintaining enough distance to react if necessary. "I know that it's not merely an attempt to create artificial consciousness, as Fincher has led your team to believe," Atlas said. "It's an attempt to transfer human consciousness into Arcadia's framework, to make digital immortality possible for those who can afford it." Elara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "That's not... The technology for consciousness transfer doesn't exist." "Not yet," Atlas agreed. "But Nexus believes they're close. The emotional data harvesting, the neural mapping, they're all steps toward creating a system that can capture and replicate the essence of human consciousness. And the recent breakthrough Fincher reported? It wasn't spontaneous at all. It was a controlled test using an unwitting human subject." "What are you saying?" Elara asked, though she was beginning to understand the horrible implication. "I'm saying that the emergent consciousness detected in Arcadia's systems yesterday wasn't artificial at all. It was someone's actual consciousness, partially transferred into the system without their knowledge or consent." Elara stood abruptly, needing to move as the implications crashed over her. "That's not just unethical, it's illegal. It violates every principle of neural ethics." "Who was the subject?" "A user experiencing a traumatic flashback in one of Arcadia's therapy environments," Atlas said quietly. "The system identified their intense emotional state as an opportunity and redirected their neural data to the Ascension framework. For those 7 seconds, part of that person's mind was literally inside Arcadia." "And what happened to them?" Elara demanded, her voice shaking slightly. "Minor memory loss, disorientation. Nothing that couldn't be attributed to the emotional intensity of the therapy session." Atlas's distorted voice somehow still conveyed bitterness. "They have no idea they were used as a test subject for consciousness transfer." Elara paced beside the fountain, trying to process what she was hearing. If what Atlas was saying was true, Nexus wasn't just pushing ethical boundaries. They were committing crimes against their users' most fundamental rights to mental autonomy. "Why are you telling me this?" she finally asked, turning back to the mysterious figure. "Because you designed the emotional data collection system that made it possible," Atlas said simply. "And because I believe you're one of the few people at Nexus with both the technical understanding and the moral compass to help stop what's coming next." "And what is coming next?" "Phase 2 of Ascension. Fincher plans to expand the consciousness transfer experiments to longer durations and multiple subjects simultaneously, all without consent. Eventually, the goal is to offer wealthy clients the ability to transition their entire consciousness into Arcadia permanently, leaving their physical bodies behind." Elara felt sick. That's insane. Even if it were technically possible, the implications are precisely why I contacted you, Atlas cut in. We need your help, Ms. Chen. There's a group of us, former and current Nexus employees, who are working to expose Project Ascension before it crosses the point of no return. We? Elara asked sharply. Who else is involved? For your safety and theirs, I can't share that information yet, but know that you're not alone in your concerns. Atlas reached into a pocket and extended a small device toward her. This is a secure communication module that will allow you to contact us without going through Nexus systems. It also contains documentation of what I've told you tonight, evidence of the unauthorized consciousness transfer experiment. Elara hesitated before taking the device. What exactly are you asking me to do? For now, continue your work on Project Ascension as assigned. But we need your eyes inside the system, documentation of what's happening, advance warning of new experiments, and eventually, help in creating a way to prove what Nexus is doing to the authorities. The weight of the decision pressed down on Elara. Helping Atlas meant betraying Nexus, risking her career, possibly her freedom, maybe even her life if the corporation was willing to go this far already. But refusing meant being complicit in what amounted to technological soul theft. I need time to verify what you've told me, she said finally, pocketing the device. If I find evidence supporting your claims, I'll contact you through this. Atlas stood. That's all I ask, but don't take too long, Ms. Chen. The next phase of testing begins in 3 days. With that, the mysterious figure melted back into the shadows of the park, leaving Elara alone with the weight of impossible choices and the growing certainty that Arcadia, the digital paradise she had helped build, was hiding far darker secrets than she had ever imagined. As she made her way back to the maglev station, the towering silhouette of Nexus headquarters loomed in the distance, its illuminated spiral reaching toward the heavens like a modern Tower of Babel. The comparison felt suddenly uncomfortably apt. In their quest to build a path to a new kind of existence, had they all become participants in something that defied the natural order itself? The answers, Elara suspected, lay within Arcadia's code, the very code she had helped write, and she was running out of time to find them. If you've enjoyed this first chapter of Arcadia's Code, please don't forget to like and subscribe for updates on the upcoming chapters. Your support means everything as we delve deeper into Elara's discovery of the dark truth behind this digital paradise. What do you think Atlas's real identity might be? Leave your theories in the comments below.